It was the kind of fall evening that felt too quiet for its own good. The streets shimmered beneath orange lamplight, and a cool breeze carried the smell of rain and decay. Inside the Spirit Halloween store, Ryan stood alone behind the counter, watching shadows dance across plastic masks. He'd worked this seasonal gig for 3 years now, cycling between odd jobs and lonely nights. But something about this autumn felt different, heavier. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the kind of intuition that creeps into your bones when the air gets cold enough to bite. The register hummed faintly, the fluorescent lights above flickering like restless ghosts. Ryan leaned back, exhaling. He didn't mind the job, it paid enough, and he liked the quiet. The trouble was always people, especially the kind who came in close to closing time, when the store turned into a hollow maze of rubber faces and empty laughter. It was almost 9:30 p.m. when the bell above the door rang. 2 men walked in, both young, maybe 20, wearing hoodies and the same blank look that made Ryan's gut twist. They moved with the casual arrogance of people who had nothing to lose. He tried not to judge, but in a job like this, instinct becomes armor. The taller one, with a thin scar above his eyebrow, grabbed a vampire mask off the shelf. His friend chuckled, adjusting the skeleton gloves he'd already slipped on. Ryan forced a polite nod. "We're closing in 15, guys." No response. Just the sound of shoes scraping linoleum and hushed laughter echoing through aisles lined with costumes and latex heads. He'd seen this pattern before: distraction, separation, concealment. He watched them split up, one drifting toward the back aisle where the security camera had been glitching for weeks. Ryan reached for the store's walkie. "Evan, you still in the stockroom?" Static answered. His coworker was probably sorting boxes again, headphones in. Typical. Ryan sighed, straightened his name tag, and followed the tall one down the aisle. "Hey, man, just letting you know that section's about to close." The man didn't turn. He was facing a rack of fake weapons, axes, knives, and plastic chains. "Cool," he muttered, his tone flat, cold. Ryan caught the faintest glint of metal in the man's sleeve. His breath hitched. For a second, the air in the room shifted. That instinct again, the one that warns you just before things go wrong. Ryan's pulse began to climb. "You need a basket for those?" he asked, nodding toward the pile of items half hidden behind the man's hoodie. The man smirked. "You think I need help carrying my stuff?" There was a pause, and then a low chuckle that didn't sound like humor. Something moved behind Ryan. The second man had circled back, silent as a shadow. Ryan felt it before he saw it, that quiet dread crawling up his spine. "Look," he said, forcing calm. "If you're gonna buy those, I just need to—" A sudden shove slammed him against the shelf. Plastic skulls tumbled down like bones. His breath left his body as the taller man leaned in, whispering something he couldn't process. "You shouldn't have followed us." Ryan's mind flashed white. He twisted, pushing the man off, stumbling back toward the register. His heart pounded so loud, it drowned out everything else. "Evan!" he yelled, voice cracking. But no answer came. Just the hum of lights and the echo of his own fear. The shorter man reached into his backpack. For a heartbeat, Ryan thought he was pulling a weapon, but instead, it was a can of spray paint. "You ever see what happens when someone messes with people like us?" he hissed, shaking the can. Ryan grabbed the phone behind the counter. "I'm calling the cops," he said, trying to sound firm, even though his hands trembled. The taller one laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "Go ahead." Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sprayed across the counter, black fumes filling the air. Ryan coughed, stumbling back. The paint hit his arm, the fumes burning his throat. He swung wildly, catching the man across the chest with a plastic broomstick. It cracked, useless. The 2 men lunged, grabbing him, shoving him to the floor. His head hit the tile. Stars exploded behind his eyes. The world blurred, colors melting into one another. Through the haze, he could hear the taller man speaking, almost calm. "All this for a few masks, man. You should have just let it go." Ryan spat blood, chest heaving. "I don't let thieves walk out." His voice was hoarse but defiant. The man crouched beside him, face half lit by the flicker of a dying light. "That's your mistake." Then came the spray. Not paint this time. Something sharper, more toxic. Pepper spray. It hit him full in the face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes, the fire consuming his vision. He could hear laughter, cruel, distant, and footsteps fading toward the door. In that darkness, time collapsed. Every second felt stretched thin like wire. He didn't know how long he lay there, gasping, half blind, the world spinning. Then, a voice. "Ryan!" It was Evan, finally. Hands grabbed him, pulling him upright. "They're gone, man! They're gone!" Ryan couldn't open his eyes. Tears streamed down, mixing with the burning. "Call an ambulance," he rasped. "Please!" Outside, sirens began to rise, faint, distant, growing louder. The sound felt like salvation and punishment all at once. Evan helped him to the bathroom sink, pouring cold water over his face. Ryan screamed as the pain bit deeper before slowly ebbing. When he could finally see shapes again, the mirror showed a stranger. Red eyes, smeared paint, and fear carved into every line of his face. "They got away?" he asked. Evan nodded. "For now." The police came minutes later, lights flashing against the windows, painting the store in blue and red. Ryan sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, answering questions he could barely process. They promised they'd find the two men soon. He wanted to believe that. Weeks passed. The men were caught, arrested in their neighborhood, petty criminals with a trail of similar assaults. Justice was served, or so the papers said. But every time Ryan looked into a mirror, he saw that night staring back. The scars weren't visible, but they were there. Every sound, the creak of a shelf, the hiss of spray, the jingle of a doorbell, dragged him back to the floor of that store. He quit the job before the next season, found work fixing cars instead, quieter, safer. But still, every fall, when the wind carried that same brittle chill, he'd catch himself glancing over his shoulder, expecting those footsteps again. Sometimes, late at night, he'd pass a Spirit Halloween sign and feel his stomach tighten. It wasn't fear anymore. It was memory, the kind that doesn't fade, just burrows deeper. He once told a friend, "The thing about monsters is, they don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they walk through the front door, smiling." And somewhere, beneath the hum of autumn air, he could still hear the laughter. Two men fading into the night, leaving behind a season he'd never love again. Beat. Because some nights, the real horror isn't what's outside your door. It's what memory keeps locked inside your mind, waiting for the leaves to fall. The cornfields stretched endlessly beneath the dying sun, golden rows waving like a sea of whispers. Daniel stood at the edge, boots sinking into damp soil, his breath fogging in the cold air. This was supposed to be home. He'd taken the job after the factory layoffs, helping the farm owner prep the maize for Halloween. It wasn't glamorous work, hauling hay bales, carving pathways through the stalks, but it kept him busy, away from the city and its ghosts. At night, when the others left, Daniel stayed. Something about the maze called to him. The silence, the way wind moved through the rows like the earth itself was breathing. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. But peace has a strange way of cracking. The longer he stayed, the more he heard things he couldn't explain. Footsteps when he was alone, the faint sound of breathing, the whisper of his own name from somewhere deep inside the field. He'd tell himself it was the wind, or maybe an animal, but each night that whisper grew closer, more human. It sounded like a man who knew him. One evening, while the horizon burned orange, Daniel noticed fresh footprints near the maze entrance. Bigger than his, heavier. He followed them a few steps in before stopping. Something told him not to. He looked back at the barn where his tools lay scattered, then toward the path winding into darkness. Probably just a drifter, he muttered, though the words didn't convince him. The air had shifted. Heavier. Colder. That night, he stayed later than usual, finishing up the final section near the center. The maze was almost ready for the festival. Kids would laugh here soon, couples would get lost, and he'd stand by the exit pretending not to envy them. But tonight, there were no kids, no laughter. Only Daniel and the dark. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds, and his flashlight flickered, cutting weak beams through the corn. He took another step, crunch, and froze. A figure stood ahead, half shrouded in the mist. Male, tall, motionless. Daniel lifted his light. "Hey, you can't be here!" No answer. The man turned, and for a heartbeat, Daniel thought he saw his own face staring back. The beam stuttered. Darkness swallowed the path. Daniel's pulse spiked. He ran toward where the man had been, pushing through the stalks, but the space was empty. Only the sound of rustling leaves and his ragged breath remained. He stumbled out of the maze an hour later, covered in dirt and fear. The others laughed when he told them. "You're working too much," his boss said. "No one's out here at night." But Daniel couldn't shake it. That face, that voice that whispered his name like it had known him forever. He went back the next evening. He had to. Fear and curiosity always walked hand in hand with him. The maze felt alive that night. The wind moved differently, deliberate. He walked slower, each turn tightening around him like a closing fist. The stalks brushed his arms, whispering secrets only the dark could understand. Then from ahead, humming, low, rhythmic male. Daniel froze. It was the same tune he used to whistle as a kid. His father taught it to him years ago before he disappeared one fall and never came home. Daniel stepped closer, flashlight trembling. "Dad?" The humming stopped. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Then, movement. A shadow darted left, deeper into the maze. He chased it. Branches tore his jacket. Mud splashed up his legs, but he didn't care. His breath came out in sharp bursts, heart pounding against his ribs. "Dad!" he yelled again. At the center, he found a clearing. A circle of trampled earth, candles half buried in mud, and an old wooden crate. On top sat a photograph, warped by water. It was him, Daniel, as a boy, standing beside his father in the same field. His chest tightened. "How?" he whispered. He hadn't seen this picture in decades. His father had taken it the week before he vanished. Daniel reached out, but before his fingers touched the photo, he heard it. That voice again. Close now. "You shouldn't have come back." He spun, light flaring across the stalks. No one. The voice came again, from behind him this time. "You think the maze forgot?" The air grew cold enough to bite. Daniel's breath fogged in front of him like smoke from a dying fire. Something moved between the rows, tall, deliberate, circling him. "Who are you?" Daniel shouted, though part of him already knew. The whisper came softer now. "You left me here, Daniel." He backed up, tripping over the crate, landing hard. Pain shot through his side, but he barely noticed. Out from the shadows stepped a man, his father or what was left of him. Face pale, eyes hollow. Dressed in the same flannel he wore the day he vanished. Daniel couldn't breathe. "You're not real." His father smiled, or tried to. "Neither was the man you became." He stepped closer, boots sinking into the mud. "You buried me in this maze the night it rained. You told yourself it was an accident. But you remember, don't you?" Daniel's mind split open, memory flooding back like water through a crack. He was 12 again, arguing with his father about leaving town. The storm, the struggle, the shovel, the silence after. He fell to his knees. "No, I didn't mean—" The figure leaned down, eyes burning like dying coals. You can't bury guilt, son. It grows. Lightning flashed. The maze lit up for a second, every row alive, shifting, closing in. When the light faded, the figure was gone. Daniel stood alone in the clearing, the photograph still in his shaking hands. He ran, branches slicing his arms, mud pulling at his boots. The paths twisted, looping endlessly. Every turn led back to the same clearing, the same crate, the same voice whispering behind him. By dawn, the police found him wandering near the edge of the field, face pale, eyes hollow. He kept muttering one phrase over and over. I found him. He's still there. They searched the maze and found what he couldn't unsee. Bones buried beneath the center, wrapped in an old flannel shirt, the same one his father wore. Daniel never spoke again. He was taken to a psychiatric ward outside town, where he spent his days tracing maze patterns into paper with shaking hands. When asked what happened, he'd only whisper, "Fall remembers." The maze reopened the next year under new ownership. They said it brought good business, families, laughter. But sometimes, on cold October nights, men walking through the rows swore they heard someone humming. Soft, slow, familiar. And if you listen close enough, you might hear it too. A man's voice, caught between the rustle of dying corn and the whisper of guilt carried by the wind. Because not all ghosts are dead. Some just never found their way out.